welcome to Crawlspace. I'm Tim, I'm here with Lance, and tonight we've got a pretty interesting interview with one of our buddies from north of the border, from the Nighttime podcast, our friend Jordan Bonaparte. He joins us to talk about Boston's Vanishing Men, the men who are found dead in water, and we're here to talk tonight about paranormal possibilities. How are you tonight, Lance?
I'm doing extremely well, thank you. How are you?
Fantastic.
Good. Yeah, I think I mentioned in the episode coming up that anytime we talk with Jordan, who's awesome, and you should really listen to his podcast. The Nature Boy stuff is amazing.
It is.
It's incredibly interesting. But anytime we talk to Jordan, I feel like that's the signal. It's like a bridge to when our episodes get more involved. It's almost like a little prelude. Everyone gets to take a break, take a breath, and then we move into something. We dig deeper. We get right into it. You said we talk about the paranormal with this. It starts with that, but we really just have a cool conversation.
Yeah, and we do mention this in the episode too, but we don't want the audience to misconstrue the order of this episode as meaning that we're going to go after paranormal things with this case. We're going to look at a lot of things with this case. It just so happened we decided to check this angle out first because we kind of want to rule it out, I guess.
Sure, it's going to be talked about anyway. We might as well talk about it now. We might as well talk about it with Jordan from the Nighttime podcast, who has he's really articulate in the way he speaks about anything paranormal or anything that's not explained. And again, it's you get it out of the way, you have a cool conversation, and we have a whole lot more to talk about with this case, and we can start really focusing on that coming up.
Okay, so we hope you enjoy the interview. Follow us on Twitter at crawlspacepod and email us if you have any thoughts. crawlspacepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Okay, so here we are with Jordan Bonaparte from the Nighttime podcast. Jordan, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me back, Tim and Lance. And I say having me back. I was a guest on Maura Murray, but never on Crawlspace, so this is a big night.
Love having you on. It's always a good time. And we were just talking before we rolled that this is, we're going to, at least in my head, I'm treating this as a bridge episode of Crawlspace.
What do you mean by that?
For the Boston, the Vanishing Men of Boston, I feel like when we have Jordan on, it's a bridge to something else. We're gonna shift topics a little bit and bridge from the reality or the realisticness of there being some sort of tangible thing going on with the Missing Men of Boston, the Vanishing Men of Boston, and we're gonna bridge into some alternative discussions.
Yeah, I feel like there are avenues to go down in this case, obviously. We've been contacted by a lot of people. We have other episodes we're planning on doing. So the order of this episode, where we're going to talk about some paranormal possibilities with Jordan, isn't indicative of where the investigation is going. We're just spreading out wide, and we're taking a look at some paranormal possibilities. And so we thought of Jordan, one of the first people we thought of to talk to sort of broach this topic, because you cover some paranormal things on your show, but you also cover missing people, real life missing people and things like that. So this is sort of a case that some might say would blend both genres. So what do you have to say so far about this case?
Yeah, it's I'm probably unique where I'm really into paranormal, ghost stories, UFOs, but I'm also a very grounded, analytical type mind. So when I get into a story that has maybe paranormal aspects to it, I generally want to find concrete proof or some unexplainable thing that leads me in that direction. In fact, when I listened to your first part on this case, I was kind of surprised that you just went there so quick. When I didn't know that's what you were going to get into. So when I was listening to that episode, maybe 5 or 10 minutes in, when you started getting into a paranormal possibility, I was like, it's about time these guys start talking about this stuff.
I just want to be clear who got into the paranormal possibility.
Lance.
I did. Yeah. No.
What did happen? I don't remember, actually.
If I remember the moment correctly, we started talking about some sort of paranormal
Sirens.
reason. Yeah, and then I went into the sirens thing.
It's the kind of case where your mind goes there initially, because how have all these people disappeared, all these similar types of people disappeared in a short amount of time, and so many of these characteristics of their disappearances and their deaths are similar that it is eerie. So then you start to think of, well, what has patterns? Like serial killers have patterns, but for it to be a serial killer, especially one, that's really far-fetched too. So it's definitely something we're going to look at, not something we're saying is off the table at all. But we wanted to talk about paranormal possibilities because that's also where your mind goes. Like, if this isn't a serial killer, and what's going on?
Yeah, it's definitely strange because there's so many similarities in terms of the age, the small amount of space where this has happened, as well as the cases that were brought up on the first episode of your show covering it. It's mainly within, I say, like a 10-year period that you have all these things happening. So it does bring the mind, like a serial killer, it could fit, and I look forward to you exploring that. As far as having a paranormal connection, like if it was me researching it, and I haven't researched it aside from just listening to your episode, what I would want to do is not do my research online, but I would want to go through the historical record for this area, looking for similar cases through history. Boston's such an old city. If there's, something happening to investigate, it should have been happening for a long time. So if you went to like the public archives, let's say, and got some old newspapers from 50, 75, 100 years ago, it'd be really interesting if, before the universities were set up and all that there, if you could find similar things happening, that amount of time ago. I don't know if that's been done. It seems like is pronunciation Elise from the Cryptid Antiquarian. It seems like she seems to be pretty much the leading researcher. I just don't know if she got that far yet. When I heard her talking about research, a lot of it was online research, it seemed.
And I know there is research going into pre-2003 to look for patterns. There are people out there who have been looking into that, and we'll be talking to everybody who's been looking into this case. It's interesting that you went there so quickly with this interview, because I'm wondering how far back you're imagining it going, and it kind of builds on the patterns. But you can answer.
Yeah, it really, I would just go back as far as possible, because if it has some type of, like, what I would want to find for me to go towards paranormal is something that starts the whole thing off. And right now there's several cases with similarities in a short amount of time, but I don't see anything that really is, like, it doesn't seem like there's, this significant thing in history that would, create enough dark energy or enough any reason for something bad to happen.
Are you saying there was no Boston Massacre? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it'd be interesting if you could trace something back that far. I just don't see why, and what happened in 2003 that would start something off. Maybe as you went, because the way often, like, a paranormal story or a good ghost story, often this comes from a good writer that's imaginative, but also does good research. And people talk about, in paranormal writing, like myth building or lore building, where they'll take a series of similar cases like what we have here, and they'll just go back through history to find, the root of it and build a story that way. Right now, what's here is the basics that a good writer would start with. and work back from to build the lore, build the myths. Just for an example, if you found something that happened, 150 years ago, that would be, really, really dark and unsavory, you could maybe make the case for that leading to, future things happening. But just for what's there now, my mind wouldn't go towards the paranormal. I think more likely it would be either like a serial killer could be possible, but even more likely than that, I think it's just a social situation with a lot of young people, probably university students, taking risks, ending up near the water, either due to suicide or misadventure. To me, that seems to be the most likely explanation, and without a clear thing from history that would get the ball rolling in terms of a paranormal beginning to this, I haven't seen that come out.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Go back as far as you can and look into these disappearances. I think maybe you got some imagination adrenaline going on with the release of It soon. That there was this moment where it happened and it keeps reoccurring. I do love that concept, though.
Well, it's true, but could it be something like the Salem witch trials? I mean, obviously that's something that gives you a ton of dark energy if you're a believer in this, obviously, and I believe in energy, and that is going to give a ton of energy out. Salem, Massachusetts to this day has an odd energy to it, but it's not necessarily right next to Boston, or it's not in Boston. It's like 20 miles, 30 miles away, or whatever it is. So I don't know if paranormal energy can travel down, can take an Uber down the highway.
I don't know if it takes Uber, but there's certainly a lot of dark history all around there, and dark history wouldn't have this starting in 2003. So I would think if there was something more to it, there would be a more clear, consistent history going back to, as far back as history allows. And I think that's what's missing. But if a lot of the research is done online, that would make sense why 2003 and forward is the news reports and the results that are surfacing. But that would be something for a researcher. And there's other things you could do too. Like and different people believe different things about this, but there are a lot of enthusiasts who use different means to investigate the possibility of paranormal energy or the existence of life after death. And if you believe in ghosts, some people believe ghosts could be lingering around, wanting to talk to us and screw with us. I've gone on, and I know it's people are rolling their eyes as I say this, but I've gone on several. People will call them, and I use scare quotes, they'll call them investigations into the paranormal, where they use the different types of equipment. And it does take a bit of an imagination, but I've heard things and seen things that I find incredible and really make my imagination go. One thing I would like, if it could be, the problem in this case is a lot of these are newer cases with families that are still suffering, so it would be seen as disrespectful. But using the type of means people would use to investigate the paranormal or the possibility of a haunting, you could use that just to see where it takes you.
Like dowsing rods or something?
I wasn't going there, but there's what kind of where it usually starts is this thing people will call a spirit box. And if you ever watch those shows about like haunted houses and stuff, they use these. And basically what it is it's like an AM FM radio, and it's set so that it's just it's playing the sound of the AM FM radio through a speaker, but it's cycling through the channels or through the frequencies really quick. So it'd be like if you had your radio on full blast and you were just spinning the wheel as fast as possible. So it's only spending, say, like a millisecond or a fraction of a second on each channel. So what you're actually hearing is just like, as every so often it's picking up a channel that has a signal. People who believe in this believe that the spirits that are present on Earth are able to influence the sounds between the channels. So if they have something to say to you, they can manipulate the sound that the spirit box is making. So the way you would do it, if you were going to do it, is you would stand at the side of the water. You would have your spirit box blasting this awful sound that's just blah, 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 and you would record that, and you would say something like, "Is there anyone here? And if there is, do you have something you want to say to me?" And then you would listen to the blah, 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 and try to hear it respond to you in some way. Some people will go a step farther, where they'll take that recording, put it on a computer, and try to manipulate it to try to find a way, to try to find a voice within there. But people who are, non-believers in this, they would maybe say that they're just manipulating it until they make it say what they want using software. But anyway, I would be really curious to hear the results of someone using that type of test near the waters on a case like this.
First of all, when this thought went through my head simultaneously as I saw Tim nod as if he was understanding what you were talking about, the thought that went through my head while he was nodding like, yeah, was, what the fuck are you talking about?
I don't know. Yeah, I think I was just like interested in.
No, you were going,
else.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's an interesting idea. Yeah, I think I would love to do it. I think it's a solid idea.
What
else are we gonna do? We're gonna hunt a serial killer with binoculars. We're gonna walk around and wear a sandwich board that says "serial killer." Hey, we're right here. We're this is out of the box ideas. These are out of the box thinking.
Those are fantastic ideas too. We've talked about going down there and walking these routes and everything, and you can do all of these things. I was actually just going to back up and say, if you're doing something and you're not hurting anybody, doing something that's might, bring you some sort of answer for this, I don't see it as being disrespectful at all, as long as you have established that you're doing it in good faith.
We're just keeping an open mind here. All these ideas are outside the box because this is a case that is not normal, and people aren't doing anything, and it hasn't stopped. So I don't know what the answer is, what to do.
Yeah, and really, you're not talking about a case. What your series seems to be about, rather than a case, is about a connection that all these other cases have. So it's a bit different. If you were investigating any one of these stories, you'd be interviewing friends and where were they that day and, what was going on in their life. Where really what it seems you're focused on is just this trend that's apparent starting since somewhere around 2003. So, you're talking about something odd. So I guess it's a bit different than, a typical discussion like this. But as far as, the paranormal, the spirit box thing, it's similar to like a Ouija board. So it's more of often people will take it on as a group activity, more so for fun, but people who are really into it would apply it in a case like this just to see what could happen. Because you hear, police investigators will talk to a psychic, and this is really no different than that. If, depending on where I'm avoiding making this like a religious discussion, but dependent on where you fall, within the spectrum of believer, this isn't a lot different than, talking to a psychic. Some people would also say you could just go down on the water and take some pictures and, develop them and see if you see some weird stuff. But as someone who went to school for photography, I would urge you not to do that because most of it can be explained pretty easily.
Right. And look at what you've said. You said that you'd be interested in seeing a pattern that started before 2003, something that goes even further back. And that was something that Tim and I have never put out there to the listening audience.
Who I would speak to if I was investigating this, aside from going through old newspapers, I would try to find like a historian, somebody who's lived there for years and is interested in history, and not really tell them what you're working on, but see what they could tell you similar to that could be connected to this that's happening, historically. Because if you could find a trend going back, it's a much different story than 2003 on.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, so if there are any historians listening, or if anyone knows any Bostonian historians, please contact us, because this is not exactly an area that we're super familiar in. Jordan, are you familiar with David Paulides and his work?
Not familiar, no, but I'd love to hear about it.
The Missing 411 series of
Yes.
books. It came up
Okay.
on our first episode in this case.
Yeah. I just
He
didn't know the researcher's name, but yes, I am.
Yeah, he writes about clusters of people who go missing. Often, a lot of them are wearing red. A lot of them are from national parks, but he's really isolated these clusters all over the country. And I believe people have taken it to all over the world. What do you think of that work?
Well, I kind of relate that back to what I mentioned prior about the idea of like myth building and lore building, which is some if you are a writer with a great imagination that's well organized can collect enough similar cases and and build a case for whatever your belief is or whatever idea you're trying to push. And what I think he could have done is just collected all the cases of missing people from national parks, and when you put them all together, in one list, all of a sudden it seems like there's a lot going on, and it's just like they say, statistics and numbers and graphs and charts. You can kind of make them say whatever you want depending on how you put the chart together or how you lay out the numbers. It kind of works the same way with a story like that. If having it all laid in front of you, you're like, whoa, that's a lot of people missing from national parks.
You're saying that national parks, on average, are a little bit more dangerous than your random suburban street, right? Obviously, because there's hiking involved, there's cliffs, things like that. So it's probably not a coincidence that more people go missing there or die there than on a suburban street. And when you look at this case, the Vanishing Men of Boston, a lot of these men turn up in water. He's like, well, Boston's surrounded by water. So is it really that coincidental?
Also, the colors of Boston College, maroon and gold. The colors of Boston University, violet. These men are in their early 20s. They're going to college. There's the Red Sox play there. If we're making a connection with these, some of them were wearing red, and that goes into the whole red thing. It's like, well, this guy left a sporting event. He might have been wearing a Red Sox jersey or something that was red.
It could just be a coincidence that color turned up. Like just as well, it could have been like they all just happen to have glasses or brown hair or whatever the case is. But it's there could be more to it, but I think Boston, a lot of university students, a lot of risk taking, drugs, alcohol, bars, and even some of the stories involved, although in the prior episode where you discussed it, one guy, I think, at least from the Cryptid Antiquarian, had mentioned he had drank, that night, but only a small amount. But, if you're throwing all that in there and you have a bunch of people around water, sometimes people are going to end up in water. And I live in a university town myself, and once every couple of years, something dark happens around the university. And I'm sure in my hometown, I could trace back the last 15 years and, and find several cases that mirror exactly what's going on there. But I just wonder if this could be a case of someone who's just well organized that went through the history from 2003 to present and just managed to find these cases.
Are you hiring? Do you know where to post your job to find the best candidates?
Are you specifically asking me if I'm hiring in the Crawlspace studios?
Sure.
No, you're all I need.
Oh, well, that's sweet. But with ZipRecruiter, you can post your job to 100 plus job sites with just one click. Did you know that?
No. I would like to know more about this ZipRecruiter that you're talking about.
Well, their powerful technology efficiently matches the right people to your job better than anyone else. That's why ZipRecruiter is different. See, unlike other job sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them.
It finds them. Okay, good.
In fact, over 80% of jobs posted on ZipRecruiter get a qualified candidate in just 24 hours.
I don't want a bunch of emails. Tell them, I bet they overload you with a bunch of emails.
No, you got it all wrong. There's no juggling emails or calls to your office. Simply screen, rate, and manage candidates all in one place with ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use dashboard.
That's awesome. So they give you a dashboard. You don't even have to bombard your own email account. You work right off of their dashboard. That's great.
Find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by businesses of all sizes to find the most qualified job candidates with immediate results.
It'd be awesome if I had some sort of promo code, because I'm on the fence.
You're not even going to believe it. Because right now, our listeners can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/crawlspace.
So you're saying that ZipRecruiter.com/crawlspace, you get it for free if you go to ZipRecruiter.com/crawlspace. You can try it for free. One gentleman is in a blizzard and he's talking on the phone after leaving a bar. He might not be drunk, but he is in a blizzard and he is talking on the phone, so he is distracted and he's walking down to the piers. And I think Tim and I both said, and I thought at the time, how do you just walk into the water? I mean, isn't there something stopping you from doing that? And just going down there and looking around, there really isn't a lot of stuff stopping you from just walking into the water.
Especially if it's dark and, in a heavy blizzard, weird things can happen. One of the, on a side note or a sidebar, one of the oddest experience I've ever had, I was driving my car on a dark highway at night and there was a pretty good blizzard and the wind was coming behind me, coming over my car, but the wind was coming almost at the exact speed that I was driving, like say, 100 kilometers an hour or 80 miles per hour, whatever's in the States. But the wind was like the same speed I was driving. And because of that, the snowflakes in the air just seemed to be suspended still in front of my car. Like my headlights were lighting them up. So I felt like myself and all the snowflakes were stationary and I could just see the yellow line on the road kind of weaving around just the way it was moving. And it was so disorienting and odd. So walking in heavy snow, not that would happen, but odd things can happen. And I could see how someone could end up in the water.
Yeah, even without that snow hypnosis going on, if you're distracted a little bit and you've had maybe even 2 beers, so you're, loosened up a little bit and you're
on your
talking on the
smartphone.
phone. Yeah,
or you're looking on your phone too.
Yeah. There are very interesting cases that we just can't explain with these missing men. For example, Jonathan Daly, who was found in the Charles River by the Boston University rowing coach, and law enforcement said that he was wrapped in chains and weighted down by a cement block. Like that's clearly something. That's clearly something nefarious right there.
I don't think that's clearly something nefarious. It could be him committing suicide. He's it's the same reason that Aaron Hernandez sprayed dish soap underneath the area where he hung himself. It's to prevent him from stopping the suicide after he has already attempted it.
Excellent point, and I'll take that back. My intention with the comment was to say you can see how the perception of something nefarious would be there.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. In looking at these cases and, in hindsight is different. Like say you brought up Elisa Lam's case actually in the last episode, much like that, when you're looking at the strange circumstances surrounding the death, when you just are an outsider who walks in and finds a body, it may look so unusual, but you don't know what happened and how he ended up in that position. Certainly something, unnatural happened that led to that death, but it could be a lot of things.
Well, I just want to point out one quick thing about coincidences, patterns, and accidents, and how it's so easy to fall into the romantic feeling of the story, right? You said things become lore after a certain period, like after the right writer or the appropriate take and the angle is put on it. You can link anything together and it becomes very very good storytelling, very rich storytelling. And this case, it by far is one of the most tempting to do that with, because you can look at all of them individually, and you can really put your links there too. Even on the older gentleman, you can put your links there. You know, they were older, but this guy was a professor at MIT, and this guy was wearing red. So, yeah, or there was a smiley face insignia. You can start to put the pinpoints in there. Doing this, and I don't know if this definitely applies to you as well, Jordan, but doing this with Tim and I, and Tim mentioned it on another episode where at some point we just kind of grew out of the fun of it. You know, it's really not that fun to apply paranormal situations to someone who just went missing and was found a month ago. And you know, the poor family is there, and we're like, oh, you know, a siren took him into the water.
Yeah, we're yucking it up over here.
Yeah.
Well, it's with paranormal research and interest, it's often old stories. You know, in 1840, this person was thought to be a witch. Because if somebody, and I'll go here, and you may want to cut this out, but if you really wanted to research paranormal and find evidence of a haunting, the spot to go wouldn't be an old house in your town that's run down. It would be to go where something brutal and terrible happened over a long period of time, like places that were associated with World War II, let's say. Nobody would ever do an investigation on a place like that because it's just too sensitive and emotional. So instead it's reserved for, we're going to investigate the basement of this old building and, you know, in your town.
Or Gettysburg from the Civil War, because that was much longer ago.
Yeah, you're far enough removed. Like the people who were affected by it, you know, grandparents aren't here anymore to be upset by it, or grandchildren, let's say. But a case like this would be controversial to apply something as controversial as, you know, paranormal research to. Maybe in 100 years, somebody will be downloading podcasts from, you know, back in the day, and they'll stumble upon this, and then they'll go and do it, and it'll be much more acceptable.
I have a question about entities on camera, right? We just talked about entities coming through on radio or some kind of using some kind of frequency. So CCTV is, you know, security cameras up all over the city, and some of these guys were caught on CCTV. Some of them specifically entering the water. That was what law enforcement, Boston police, said. So I think you see where I'm going with this. Would a ghost, you know, whatever, if we're talking dark entities, we're talking out of the box ideas, would a ghost appear on CCTV? And second part of that question, what would the Boston Police Department do? Would they even notice? Would they believe it? I mean, these are people who are very grounded in reality. They're trained to not look at something like what we're talking about right now. So even if they did see something that you and I might say, oh, well, that could be some kind of dark entity, would they even admit that to themselves or to anyone else?
Yeah, good question. It depends. I guess it depends what you see on the video, because some people believe that photography, digital or traditional film photography, can capture things from, you know, beyond life or from beyond our world. Some disagree with that, and I'm more of on the team of disagreeing with that. I have never seen a photo or evidence to support that, but I have seen things happen on video that I can't explain. Either people doing things that could be a sign of mental illness or could be sign of something compelling them to do something odd. Like just, for example, walk into water for no apparent reason, or do something that would require, you know, superhuman strength. I would just be speculating without seeing the video, but I think seeing the video would tell you the story. If it was a suicide, or if it was an accidental falling, that would be that you would think would be apparent in the video. But I couldn't imagine police concealing something because they fear it would be evidence of paranormal activity. Although I would like to live in a world where that would happen.
That would be fun. What's your take on the time frame of these disappearances? For the most part, the majority of the disappearances were at the end of the fall, beginning of winter, and at the end of the winter, beginning of spring-ish, October, November, and February, March. Is there a outside the box explanation or theory from you?
When I think of that, where my mind goes is if suicide and risk taking and seasonal depression, that could explain some of the people, late winter. Myself, as someone who lives in a university town, early fall leading into winter is when a lot of the university students are coming back, September. So people are partying hard and, having a great time. So that could talk to the social factors. As far as thinking outside the box, I can't think of any reason that time of year would be any more powerful spiritually or in any way. But again, there could be something from history that, that time of year would build the case. But really, without finding something in history to base a paranormal conclusion on, it's kind of hard to say.
I'm going to put you to the test here.
Let's do it.
So are there any, what could it be, all right, in lore, in history of what you know about paranormal possibilities, about what we're talking about? We mentioned sirens, right? So that's something that sort of exists in folklore as a woman or women out in in water summoning men towards them, and maybe they're figments of their imaginations, and so maybe that's how these men drown. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you've heard of, other than in complete ridiculous folklore?
I've heard of that in mythology and folklore, but what it would come down to, and where I would be thinking, is this is happening to men, and it's happening when men are alone. It seems to be mainly at night, and it seems to involve water. As far as connecting all that and finding some connection, if something is getting them in the water, so there's video of it. The video of them entering the water, if it was them falling into the water in the video you were referring to, I don't see why the police wouldn't say that it was an accidental death. Why would the police keep a photo of somebody slipping into the water or a video of someone slipping into the water? I'm thinking there must be something suspicious. My mind, and this is me completely speculating, I'm thinking that's a video showing somebody walking into the water or climbing into the water in some unusual way. So my question then would be, what is compelling these men to get into the water? Are they doing it for a logical reason, i.e. ending their own life as suicide? Or are they doing it for an illogical reason, like not, being controlled by some other force? So as someone, if it was Halloween, I would say there's the possibility that there's something affecting the vulnerable men of Boston who are on their own that's bringing them to the water. What that is, I don't know.
With the men that are on the list since 2003, if you set aside the apparent suicides and you set aside the apparent accidents, somebody leaving a bar and going down to the water to take a leak and they fall in and get swept away and then they're found a couple days later, if you take those aside and you think that there is some force out there that is selecting other people, other young men. One thing I remember back in the early 2000s when you're leaving a bar in Boston was that the train shut down early. The train ran at I think the last train was it depended on where you're at, but 12:45 or 1 o'clock. The bars closed between 2 and 2:15. Last call was 1:45 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you're staying till last call, you're not making a train.
Right, exactly. That's my point. You're not making a train. Also, Uber and Lyft did not exist back then, and the cab service was incredibly tough to get. If you were leaving a bar and you were trying to hail a cab, how many times have you walked so many blocks trying to hail a cab because hundreds of kids, hundreds of college students are out there trying to hail a cab?
Yeah, it would take a half an hour at some points.
Right. So we have these stories of one of the victims walking down the street, and there is a majority of young men who leave a bar and they text their girlfriend, or they're on the phone with their girlfriend, or they're talking to friends. They leave a bar, and it's back then, before Uber, before Lyft, there was an instinctive, intrinsic motivation to look for a cab and try to hail a cab. And we have stories of these missing men they'll be with a group and then the group loses sight of them. And that could easily be them seeing a cab and running to the cab, and the cab driver picks them up. I'm not exactly putting out a theory here, but that could be one of the forces that you're talking about. And we're not talking paranormal. We're talking about a cab driver, a sadistic cab driver. You find the cab, you get in, or a livery driver. I've been out there and I've had people pull up in, the livery cars, like a black Buick or something, and they say, $20, I'll take all your friends home. And that's what they do. That was before Uber. They would drive around and they would just get the rides. It's perfectly legal. But imagine that. That's just a theory that I said I wasn't really putting out there, but I guess I'm putting it out there by saying it. But that fits in my head. All of the accidents and suicides aside, when you leave a bar and you're with a group of people, you're looking for a cab. You were looking for a cab back then. Now you call Uber. Michael Kelleher, look at his situation. There's the evidence on his phone. They have where he pinged his Uber, and he allegedly never got into that Uber.
So what happened, in his life at that point? And if it was suicide, why would he be calling a new? Yeah.
He left the Celtics game in the third quarter.
Right. Left the Celtics game in the third quarter when his coworker / friend went back to the car that probably expecting to meet him there. He wasn't there. In the meantime, he was down in an area, Tremont Street, 138 Tremont Street in Boston, and which is an 18-minute walk from the Garden, and that's not very accessible to water at that point.
So what compelled him to go towards the water? What brought him there? And if you're far from the water and you were considering suicide, like, people will often go for what's quick and easy and near them. So to walk, across the city to find water would seem unusual.
Jordan, were you getting at some kind of possession or something like that a little while ago?
Well, not the possibility, but to use this as a springboard for imaginative thought. If there was some force that was able to control people, that could be something like that could be at play, because something's bringing these guys into the water, and that's really, it's the water and them ending up in the water. To me, that's odd. Accidents happen, but that's a lot of accidents for a short amount of time. And suicide by water, it does happen, but that just seems like a lot. So if there was some force connected to the water that was compelling these people to, drawing these people towards it, that would be interesting. And seeing the police video of this guy entering the water, I would like to see that, to see if there could be the possibility. There's so many explanations. That's just, walking down that one road and considering that one. Not to say that's what I believe is happening, but it would, it could fit.
How frustrating do you think it is to be a police officer and just looking at a video of somebody entering the water, which is what the wording that they used, that he was entering the water, and And obviously goes off frame, right? He enters the water, he goes off frame, and at some point he drowned. Like, how frustrating must that be? One, to have to explain that to the family and to the people looking into it, and two, just not knowing what happened. You're looking at something that you almost see what happened. I don't think we have an answer for that because we're not law enforcement, but that has to be extremely frustrating, especially when you get a bunch of like jamokes like us who talk about it and say, oh, it's weird wording, entering the water, and the police are probably like, well, what the fuck are we supposed to say? He entered.
They don't know what he's doing, and they're just seeing they're seeing a brief moment of a very strange time in someone's life.
Yeah.
And we don't know the quality of the video. Maybe it's saying he entered because, far off in the distance, there's just, a little thing happens and there's someone in the water. So they don't know what happened. So, we'd be speculating as to what they mean by choosing that word. But I'm sure they see footage of, people doing unexplainable strange things that result in death. And they're left, holding the bag to try to figure out, what force was at play to lead that to happen. I've seen a video just recently online. It was gone viral or whatever they say, where it was a man in court. He was in court and had just been, or all signs were pointing to him being found guilty of this really twisted crime against a child, I believe. And it's just the CCTV footage of him, like the court took a break or the trial took a break. And it's like him and his two lawyers walk out of the courtroom into like kind of this courtyard where they would have a chance to like talk. But it was like 3 stories up. So they're just walking casually. And he just, as they're walking, talking, he just walks towards the rail and just allows himself to just fall over it, 3 stories down to his death. And if you see that video, it doesn't look like he's intentionally doing it, but he obviously didn't fall because he just walked towards it and did it. But that would be something where, the police probably see video like that all the time, and, there's no explanation for what happened. The story that I just told you, it had the context of this guy had something really heavy about to happen to him, so it's easier to put it together. But if all you had was the video of that happening without the context, it would be a different piece of footage.
It certainly does open up the darker side of human nature, doesn't it, when you start talking about things like this? Because every account that we've read so far is that these young men who have gone into the water have been, not suicidal and for the successful and smart and well-adjusted, but it opens up this dark part. Like, you didn't know that there might have been something going on there, that this guy's going to wrap himself in chains and tie cinder blocks in because he doesn't want to, like you said, Tim, he doesn't want to stop himself. Those things don't always become so apparent to people immediately around the person. And especially if you're looking at a video.
Mm-hmm. And it could be, mental health could be at play. But again, on an isolated case is one thing. This is a collection of similar cases, which just makes it unique. But it comes back to lore and myth building. Somebody has put this together, collected them. A homeless guy doesn't add anything to the story. If anything, he takes away from the young guys who are ending up. So if this is the myth you're building, you would exclude him.
Yeah, exactly. Let's run with this then. This thing that I'm looking at right now is Perry Rusum. I think that's how you pronounce his name, from NBC Boston. And when this broke on April 9th at 6:41 p.m., he posts a picture of the Back Bay Fens of Money River, and Boston police say body recovered at Back Bay Fens is not Michael Kelleher. Well, who is it? I guess the guy doesn't matter. I guess that's not part of your. I guess
not
that's
the guy we're looking for.
It's not part of your the story, or
it's just a generic body.
Generic body is not this guy. It doesn't fit into the lore.
Was the article updated later to say
it was
who
a
the
Twitter
person was? Because obviously if there's a missing person and then a body shows up, that's the first question people are going to ask: is it the missing person?
It turns out that the guy was a homeless man, and you'd have to dig deep to even find the poor guy's name. So maybe they didn't know at the time, but they certainly knew when they pulled him out that it wasn't a early 20s white guy.
I don't know. I think water can do some weird things to bodies.
What I know about these cases and what they have in common, my mind, like paranormal, wouldn't be where my mind would go. I'd be looking at a social explanation, a serial killer, be it a cab driver, that would totally fit, or a movie that I love is an old horror movie called Maniac Cop, and it's about a police officer who's
movie.
Yeah, so good. But it's so true. Like if a police officer ever wanted to go on a killing spree, he would have a really easy time, and he could get away with it for a long period of time.
Unless there's body cameras.
Yeah, I guess that's different now. Yeah, the world's changed since the movie Maniac Cop was filmed, sadly. But yeah, my mind would be looking at social causes, like the type of people, the possibility of mental health problems, the stress they have through school, seasonal depression, being in a new city, drinking, winding up on their own, stumbling around in a blizzard, not to say that that's what's happening, but on the surface, those are the things that I'd be looking at before I went towards paranormal. But going to paranormal is a lot more fun, and there's some cool things you can do, like playing with a spirit box. And I'm sure you could find someone from Boston who's into that would stand on the waterfront with a spirit box and send you guys some recordings that would really blow your mind. And the whole thing with the spirit box, what you want is not just to hear a voice saying something, but you want the voice to be saying something clear that connects you with a specific case. Like if you ask the question, can anyone hear me? If they responded by saying, the name or a detail related to one of the people who passed away that you're investigating, that would be a really interesting piece of audio. And I'm sure there's people, like if someone listening to this is from Boston and they experiment with this type of thing, I'd be interested in hearing about that.
I'd be interested in hearing it too, and I would be interested in going down and seeing the whole process happen. Please don't start sending us a bunch of radio spirit box audio that we have to listen to. If anyone out there is interested and you have it and you're willing to do something like that, let us know and we will join you for it. As opposed to getting a QuickTime file.
Downloading things from people we don't know isn't our favorite thing to do.
Yeah, maybe ixnay on the mailing spirit box recordings to Lance and Tim then. Instead, they want you to bring them down there. But I've done it a bunch of times.
Whoa.
Well, that's what you said. It's an open invitation.
You said it in a lot more dangerous way.
We'll meet you.
We'll meet you.
Yeah, but it is a fun time. I've done it before, and it's really cool. But this case or these collection of cases would be a great playground for that sort of thing to happen. And the question is it respectful? And I don't think I'm in a place to answer that.